All right. We were delaying a few minutes because I think a few of you may have noticed there's a little bit of road construction. Surprise! If you weren't fully well aware of that. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Good afternoon, and I'm Nikki Devitt, and I'm president of the Petoskey Chamber. And you, if you are at the right place, should be at our Hot Topics Housing Town Hall event. And this event is focused on us tackling some critical housing issues and challenges that face Emmett County. We know that our community grapples with severe workforce shortages for a multitude of reasons, and one of them, if not one of the most prevalent, is the lack of affordable housing. But we are not alone. Today in the state of Michigan, we are about 190,000 homes short of meeting our current housing demands. So that is why we are here. We want to foster a collective approach among various stakeholders who help us figure out what our next best steps are. And they've been making strides for many years. So I hope by bringing everyone together today, it gives you a better lens of what's truly going on. So we're going to delve into a few things today, and we're going to get right to it because, as you can see, we have a big panel and a lot of ground to cover. We're going to talk about our total estimated housing demand. We're going to talk about the unique challenges we face being a rural community. So while our entire state is facing this crisis, it's different for us in Emmett County. It's different in rural communities, and we'll talk about why it's important to focus on that. And then we're going to talk about some of the housing solutions, funding, and opportunities that are just not local level, but state level as well. But before we get started, and I'm looking around the room, Chris is not here. I bet he got stuck in traffic. I'm like, well, he was coming from Traverse City. That's even worse. I want to take a moment to recognize our sponsors before we get going, so I can do this. There's a chuckle from Consumers Energy in the corner, just so everybody knows. I heard you. So before we go, I want to let you know that our Housing Town Hall today was generously sponsored by DTE Energy. And DTE Energy, like their counterpart in the corner, has a big focus on housing goals as well because they know how much that impacts our entire community. So there's a tremendous amount of support around the idea that we as a state can solve this together. So we appreciate very much their sponsorship, their support, and their insistence on making sure that Michigan is a place where everyone can live with clean energy now and beyond. And in addition to that, I have to give a shout out. This one told me he wasn't going to make it. Russ Knopf with Comfort Keepers has for many, many years supported these Hot Topics town hall events. So we do these under a lot of things. Housing is just one of them. We've done them for childcare. We use them for candidate forums. We use them for opportunities for the community to come together at no charge to be able to find out what's going on in their community, how they can contribute, and where we stand against the rest of the state, and how, in many ways, we stand up above and beyond. So I want to thank very much sincerely both Comfort Keepers and DTE Energy for their support today. And I also want to give a special shout out, Roast and Toast, if you were able to grab a cookie or a refreshment, that's courtesy of Roast and Toast, and we greatly appreciate them sponsoring for us and supporting us in that way because everybody loves 3 o'clock cookies. It's always a good thing to do. And today's event is recorded by Alpine Media. Dwan is here with us today in the back, and after the event is over, we will have this out and publishing it, so we hope that you share it far and wide, and we thank him very much for that. So, because, well, like I said, we got a lot to get to, we're going to get going to it. So I want to take a second here, and now I'll sit, and introduce our panel of speakers for you, and who we have up here, and just kind of what they do. So first and foremost, we're going to hear from Tony Lenti, who is with the Michigan State Housing and Development Authority, otherwise known as MISHDA. You'll hear us say that a lot. He's going to highlight some of our statewide programs, resources available to assist Emmett County, and beyond. We also have Melissa Milton-Pung from the Michigan Municipal League. Melissa's going to share insights on using data to inform housing policy decisions, the potential of retrofitting existing buildings. These are crazy concepts that make a lot of sense, and the benefits of zoning reforms and innovative construction techniques. Sarah Lucas, who's with the Office of Rural Prosperity, will be sharing about rural-focused initiatives in the state that are offering grants to support local housing development and sharing some successful case studies right here in our own backyard, as well as highlighting more that's going to happen on our rural horizon. Kent Wood is with the Housing Michigan Coalition and also Housing North. We'll talk about the important work of the Housing Michigan Coalition on advocating for comprehensive statewide solutions, discussing funding opportunities and some of our recent successes. Dawn Crandall, who is with the Home Builders Association and also part of the Housing Michigan Coalition, will talk about the critical role of construction and development in mitigating housing shortages. She'll talk about the impacts on building material costs, regulatory obstacles, and innovative construction techniques and more to help reducing housing costs. We'll even delve a little bit into workforce and what it means for that industry. And then we'll wrap things up with our very own Andrea Jacobs, who is the Emmett County Housing Ready Director for Housing North. Andrea will dig into some specifics that are particular to Emmett County, but also providing examples of some successful projects and what makes a project happen in the first place, and then some strategies as we continue our housing journey. So as you can see, we have a lot of information to get to, and I could totally embarrass him right now, and I think I'm gonna. Hey, Chris. Hi. I said a few words on your behalf, but you're welcome to step on up here if you'd like. We understand traffic is a little bit of a barrier today. All right, so we're going to kick things right off and get things moving, and we're going to give it a start with Tony Lenti of MISHDA. Tony is the Chief Housing Investment Officer of the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. That's the last time I'm going to say it all the way out. From now on, it's just MISHDA. So, Tony, let's look at some numbers to start. The slide we have up here, can you give us a little bit of an overview? When we're talking housing crisis, what are the numbers that MISHDA is seeing? And to follow that up, what programs, resources kind of are offered to help assist? Yeah, go ahead and stand. Be comfortable.
Can you all hear me? Yes. I have to look at this slide from this side because my numbers are about some of the program numbers that we responded to this. But the big one is at the very top. 50% of our renters pay too much for housing. They are housing insecure in a lot of ways. And our formula, in case you don't know, and I do see a lot of familiar faces here, by the way, so I know a lot of you know what these issues are. But if you don't know what like housing insecurity is if you're spending more than a third of your household income on all your housing costs, you're really at living on the margins that something could go wrong. You're not able to plan effectively or save money. But that's where we kind of look at it. And that's basically almost half of all renters are living somewhere around that level. And that is a problem. Between 2012 and 2022, the average home sales price went up 100% in the state of Michigan. Incomes during that time only went up about 40%. And that is very concerning. Even in this area, I live in Traverse City, and I've been at MISHDA for about a year and 3 weeks or something like that. I always have to admit that I have a different perspective with some communities. You know, what we have up here, we have so many people who want to have like their second home, or we have investors trying to buy homes to, to rent out. It's caused even more pressure and even more increase in some of these costs. So I feel your pain for sure. Some communities in the state would love to have that problem, I think, but they've got almost the opposite. If you go over to the Thumb, they want any kind of investment. But even there, the wages haven't kept up with the prices of their homes either. Michigan currently has a housing shortage of more than 190,000 units. We keep adjusting that upwards based on a lot of the data that we see collecting out there, that if we were going to have like a normal growth rate and try to meet the demand of what we think is going to be for all the jobs that will be coming online in the next several years, that's how much we have to be building. That's at all level, all price points, rental and for sale homes. 53% of our homes are more than 50 years old. Now, this is a significant issue because a lot of them are going to need some investment. And a lot of people living in those homes don't have the resources to invest in their own houses, which could make these homes unlivable for the next generation of families as well if we're not paying too much attention to that.
So when you're looking at those numbers, which that slide I looked at it a year ago versus a year to now. And like you said, MSHDA's adjusting these numbers with good reasons because as we'll ask you here in a few minutes, there's a way that MSHDA is now able to track, if you will, better than they were before, is where we stand from a need standpoint. But what it's important when we're looking at need is what are we doing about it? So MSHDA has a tremendous amount of programming available, and it's not just to developers, it's available to individuals, it's available to cities and beyond. So tell us about the programs with MSHDA and how they're effective.
Can you get the next slide too, so I can
get
track
you
on
going
that with my numbers?
You want this one?
Yeah, you can leave that one up there.
Okay.
In 2023, we're halfway through 2024, but 2023 was one of the best years ever at MSHDA, and we're on track for 24 to be even bigger. In home ownership, we supported over 4,400 households by providing $645 million in mortgages and down payment assistance. In rental development, that's multifamily apartment communities, we committed $490 million to create or rehab over 3,500 units. A total of almost 31,000 families participated in our Housing Choice Voucher Program. And we launched the Housing TIF program, which you all know all too well. It's a brand new program, and our very first approved Housing TIF project was here in Petoskey. So congratulations.
Big round of applause for that.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, that is the Michigan Maple Block project. So that is the very first project in the state of Michigan to use this new program through MSHDA. That's massive. I mean, one, we know that's massive for us, but that's just massive across the board. So yay us.
I was told, I started last May at MSHDA and I was told the housing tip program could pass any minute and we need to be ready. We're going to be just an onslaught of applications. So we rushed this program to the board, we got it approved, and we just sat there and sat there and sat there. And it was sort of like, it was ready to go and we didn't get an application until like December and we had to reject that one. And then it came back and finally passed it, which is the opposite of what we did with the Community Development Block Grant and Housing Resource Fund, where we created the Michigan Neighborhood Program, My Neighborhood. And that one wasn't ready to go. We opened up the window and hundreds and hundreds of applications came in that were like, we weren't quite ready for that one, and we're still dealing with that, but we had to get that going. So we have two basically new programs in the last year that can really transform communities like this. You know, the TIF program and all our other programs usually are going to work with a little bit larger projects, but then the My Neighborhood program is dealing with smaller nonprofits, municipalities, and individuals submitting applications for much smaller projects on the scale, you know, usually around 10 or below units. It just depends on what the application is going to be doing. We opened that the first window in that on April 1st, and we ended up having 60 applications come in almost immediately in the first window, and we have 115 complete applications in now, with almost I think $22 million awarded and another $8 million going to our board, so almost halfway to the goal. It starts all over again on October 1. It'll always be an October 1 program, but it took us a while to launch everything on that. But that's one of the things that we did in the last year.
And that's a simplified program too. For those who don't know, if you're, one of the barriers to housing has always been, well, how do you apply for grants if you're a community or a developer or an individual, and how are you looking at that? So this program is so much more simplified, so much easier. So MSHDA's reacted to the needs, let's just say, to give money out where it fits by making it a more simplified process, which is a big deal. It
is, and we are going to be tweaking this program all the way up until October 1 again, because we're learning from all the applicants and what the real needs are and how we can even make it simpler. The theory is that it's one window where everybody can come in and we will award from different pots of money to get the application complete. The problem with that scenario is one of the pots of the money is much more desirable than the other. So people are writing their applications to trigger the other application. We're having to go back and say, hey, what do you think about accepting some community development block grant dollars with a municipal partner? It's like, that's a much tougher sell. But it is important because it's my hope, I've been around this game for a long time, And when the Community Development Block Grant Program was at MISTA a long time ago, and the home program helped fund the rural housing, housing delivery system. So a lot of counties and nonprofits working in those counties applied to MISTA, and that's how they funded their operations. When we lost the CDBG program for a while, that kind of went away. It is my hope that that delivery system and that network in the rural parts of the state comes back. So we're going to try to continue to work on that to make that easier for people to partner with municipalities, local levels of government, essentially, to apply for those resources to get housing completed.
I'm looking at your 2023 impact. I'm throwing you a bonus question here just because I want to make sure that we highlight this. So a lot of the programs that we're talking about right now are from a development standpoint, from a city or municipality, but you touched on really quickly that you have housing voucher grants through MISTA. There is, training that's offered for first-time home buyers, rental readiness, homelessness services. So I think it's important for folks to dig into MISTA's website to understand that it goes all the way down to the individual. We understand the housing struggles within every community, and MISTA understands. So,
yeah, I would encourage you all to visit our website because it really stinks. And we're signing a contract with somebody to help us revamp it right now. It's underway. And so your feedback on how difficult it is would make it a little user-friendly. It's so bad that I just tell people Google MISTA and the topic, and you'll go to a page because it doesn't, there's no linear line of thought it's a typical state bureaucracy
Hence
thing.
why on this one I just put the QR code right
that's
up.
Even better.
I didn't even try for the programs. I was like, there's no way that's going to work.
So, if we talk about this statewide housing partnership, that was a result in 2023 and something we're proud about even more so in 2024 because it's being implemented in a way that none of us thought was possible with all the regional leads turning in regional plans, and that all of our departments are trying to react to that plan. We're trying to tailor what we want to do based on what local communities and what local regions want to do. It's not easy, and we expect both the regional plans to be tweaked every year going forward, and we expect our programs to be tweaked every year in response to that.
And when we talk about the statewide housing partnership, and I can tell you, as somebody who sits in on those meetings from the MISTA's level, they're tweaked constantly. Like it seems like every meeting we have as a partnership, we're talking about, well, okay, this is working in this region. How do we react to this? So it's very heartening to see state government listening and looking at different regions of the state and figuring out how best to respond to that. But we just had an update on some of the numbers just in the last couple of weeks. The plan was written pretty much during COVID and then announced, a year and a half ago or so. And we started off with, I believe it was 75,000 homes needed. And we updated that a couple weeks ago. You want to tell us a little bit about why?
I think we're a victim of our own success. The one thing I want to tell you about your plan, I know this is being recorded, and I hope it doesn't get out to other parts of the state, but your region's in good shape. There's a lot of positive forward momentum that's going on here. I think it's a model for what other regions are trying to do. But going back to the new goal, we were so successful in meeting, getting to 50,000 and then 75,000, but it's now set by the governor at 115,000. And this is interesting because we were all just like, oh, great. We thought we were just like going to have a great year and we're going to meet some more goals, but they just stretched it way out there. This goal is basically tracking all permits and permitted activity on construction on all levels, all price points. MISTA deals with a certain segment of that, a lot of low income, a lot of workforce housing. And we want to do more in those areas, but it also is about getting housing built at every level, at every price point. In our communities from Traverse City to Petoskey, we don't even have enough spec homes for wealthy people to come in. Like if you got doctors and, other professionals that want to relocate here for whatever, they don't get a lot of choices on what they can buy. And they report as many struggles as the workforce just trying to, work in some of our restaurants and kitchens and things like that. So we don't know, we have a lot more to do. So we're still trying to encourage anyone who wants to build, to give us a call. That's what's been interesting about these messages that have been going out about the goals. I've heard from a lot of people who are kind of developers in other arenas who are like, they want to do something. And a lot of times they want to do something in northern Michigan because they've spent some time up here. I was talking with a representative for a woman who was doing all commercial activity. And she's like, I think I want to do some housing up in Northwest Michigan because it's needed. And she had sold her company for like, almost $1 billion or something like that. She's like, I can build commercial businesses. Can I do housing? And I'm like, yes, if you can understand that, that's not that difficult of a transition. So we like setting these goals higher and higher. We want to hear from more and more people to try to meet those goals. So we'll see how well we do.
I think you're going to do great. You've been doing great for the last couple of years in responding to these. The plan, as you see, the QR code is there for all of you to use because it's really important for you to go through and kind of see what those regional action plans look like. I encourage all of you to do that. We are Region D, and Tony is right. We do have our heads together better than some of the other regions, and that's a big. That's a big nod to a lot of the work that's been done behind the scenes, even if you're not seeing dirt moving yet. That's a big nod to our county and our municipalities and the work that they've done. So, and the work of Housing North, and we'll talk more about that as we move along. Thank you, Tony, very much. And I know if you see Tony run off the stage, it's not because he's afraid you're going to accost him with questions later. It's because he's got to get to Lansing yet. So just because you're in TC doesn't mean you're still not downstate. So very much appreciated. All right, we are going to move on to Melissa. So Melissa from Michigan Municipal League. If you want to stand to see your slides or you want me to just click away, let's go. Let's see what we can do.
All right, so the title here that I threw on from a previous presentation is Housing, Housing Everywhere. Who's heard of that Samuel Taylor Coleridge poem of The Rime of the Ancient Mariner? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, you get stuck in a flat calm, and the albatross comes out of nowhere and tries to lead you to where you need to go. And what does this guy do? He kills the albatross. Let's not kill our albatross. Let's use our tools to lead us out of this mire. So let's look at our next slide.
Yeah.
All right, so here's some of our hot topics that we're working on in Policy Research Labs. I'm going to go through them in order. We're going to start with data-informed decisions. And here's a plug for my friends at MISTA. Next slide. Thank you so much for helping co-fund the creation of the Michigan Housing Data Portal. One of the things that the League has had for a long time is a partnership with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, hereafter referred to as MEDC. With MEDC, we've worked with them on RRC redevelopment ready communities, and we've had an engagement here in Petoskey. I think it was the Maple Lot.
We do.
So one of the things that we heard in many of our communities when we're looking at site redevelopment, we started to hear that people wanted a housing study. Well, you start paying for here, 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 and here. Why can't we just do this in bulk? It's your data. Let's make it available to you. So MISTA and MEDC ponied up the money for us to be able to look at what Indiana was doing, and we could do it a lot better. So this is what we created here. Here's an example from Sterling Heights. Your data, freshly made and local. This is not static. It's actively updated, and you can go in and pull down a report for each of your communities, our cities, villages, townships, and counties. And yes, it's not going to follow the contour of your exact community because we're looking at census tract data, but it does give you a really good snapshot of what's going on in your community. What can you do with it? A lot. Go pull down the report. You can see the racial dissimilarity index and see the history of redlining in your community. You can see how the housing type, go to the next slide, how housing type is a huge problem in many communities. If you're losing multifamily and you have an increasing population of smaller households, where are you gonna go? Where's my mama from Middle Georgia gonna live when she moves up here and she lives on Social Security? Where's the choir director from my church gonna live when he's looking for a place to live with his young wife and toddler? Where's my coworker in IT? You guys have all of those answers. No, really? No, you don't. We're trying to figure this out. So you all, though, have the ability to humanize some of this data, to be able to tell people about the types of new neighbors or the people already in your community who want to get off of somebody's couch to move into their own place. And this helps you tell this story. So where we would like to go with it is telling more of those stories. And who are those people, and why do we need to make room for more neighbors? And efficiently use our land. So going on to the next one. Who remembers the Jeffersons? Yeah? You're welcome for that earworm, right in your head, right? Okay, so
I would love if somebody would just hum a little bit for me.
we're moving on up.
Oh, we've even got people singing it. Go for it.
Yeah.
Tony can do it.
Oh, I know the whole thing.
So, I mean, again, this is the charm offensive. It's getting people to laugh and smile about a problem that we're experiencing, though. If you look at our housing portfolio, like what Tony has said and what's going to be talked about over here, we have a lot of buildings that are older. And they're perhaps old enough to be old, but not old enough to be nostalgic. This is a beautiful adaptive reuse. I sit on the board of the Michigan Historic Preservation Network, and I serve as their board president. And we have a lot of legislative issues that we'd like to advance to increase the availability of the historic tax credit. If you're following it and you want to actually look at it, it's House Bill 5430. House Bill 5430. Paging House Bill 5430. It would allow us to bring back in its full force the historic tax credit. Yeah, it exists right now. It sucks so badly that I don't even recommend it to people. But we want to bring it back, and we want to increase people's ability to use it not only for residential but also multifamily housing. The value in retrofitting existing housing is tremendous. Not only can you perhaps achieve a cost savings by reducing the amount of overall building costs and maybe layer in a tax credit from brownfields and historics and all those different things to reduce your per square foot cost to maybe $175 to $200 a square foot as opposed to $260 or more is what we're experiencing for new construction. You're also going to help people remain connected to that place. We have a lot of leftover school buildings that either are being replaced or our population enrollment is going down, and we know that school buildings lend themselves to be turned into housing. There's a longer conversation I would love to chat with you about, but consider how are you reinvesting in our existing building infrastructure to help people have that visual retention of community and that placemaking that carries over generations. Keep going there. Okay.
I'm just letting you go. I'm not even asking. I'm just like, go. Because you got it.
I think that at this point, it's fair to say that we all understand at least a little bit about the economic benefits of historic preservation and how it is a critical driver for our economy. However, we don't necessarily have the ability to place metrics on existing buildings and the embodied carbon that's in existing buildings. And what happens if you want to build a new LEED triple platinum building, but if you demolish a building to do that, are you really counting it fairly? No. So Michigan has the world's first LEED triple platinum building. Did you know about that? Anybody? So it's at 208 North Capitol. It's where the League's capital offices are located. It's called the Chrisman Building. And it was a insurance building for Miller's Mutual. They were able to retrofit the building, do an addition to increase the space, and have amazing energy efficiencies. It was not as expensive as demolishing and building new. It is not as expensive carbon-wise as demolishing and building new. So when you are considering whether or not a building needs to stay up, sometimes it does need to come down. But sometimes if you run yourself through one of these tools and you can see, maybe you're actually going to have a net even, or maybe even a net positive to as much as 30%. I'm happy to talk with you more about that too. There's some great examples that are coming out of some of our Michigan-based architecture firms like Smith Group and Quinn Evans. Keep going. All right, so somebody has to have heard about my belle of the ball for 2022 and 2023, right? Oh, really? You guys are in for a treat. My coworker Murph and I were the co-authors for the Pattern Book Homes project. The first one was with the premise that this used to be normal. We used to have naturally occurring multifamily housing right in our Michigan communities. We used to, oh wait, we still do. If you walk down the street and you can see a perfectly normal looking house, it's probably actually a duplex, or maybe a fourplex, or maybe there's an ADU tucked into the backyard if your community's been smart enough to allow that type of zoning reform. This is allowing us to do this type of thing here. Missing Middle Mixtape is the second volume, and it provides you with more discussions on construction type, like structurally insulated panels. We're looking at a lot of different funding opportunities that other people are going to talk about as well. And both of these provides 95% complete copyright-free building plans for ADUs, duplexes, fourplexes, etc. Check it out.
And I'm going to interject that our county and our city of Petoskey have taken into consideration the importance of this, and we greatly appreciate the leaps and bounds that Emmett County has made just in the last 2 years in adaptive use of ADUs and looking at multifamily in a different way.
Yeah.
So again, we're ahead of the game. Sometimes it may not feel like it, but these are great ways to point it out.
Thank you. The whole purpose is to challenge people to think about what new infill construction could look like, either in larger lot or in smaller places, when you're trying to emulate existing neighborhoods in terms of form, height, lot placement, setback, and volume. And it's not that scary. That leaves us with this great quote from Winston Churchill, which it states that our buildings shape us, and they do. We have to remember that oftentimes we think about history in a static way, but all those buildings that were constructed at one time were new. We've been able to recover from housing shortages in the past, just like how Michigan's manufacturing might helped us win World War II with the development of the bomber plant in Ypsilanti with our Rosie the Riveter bombers. We have the ability to evaluate what comes back from battle. Where did those planes get hit? How are you reinforcing the places that got hit? But also, how are you thinking about those places that they got hit and they never came back to? Evaluate your data. Look at where those holes are. Reinforce where those holes aren't showing you right now, so then you can continue to build the future of Michigan.
You have a couple more slides. You want to say anything on them?
Ah, I forgot I had that there. Oh.
I was just letting you go.
There's some visuals here that tells you what is it going to look like with the new infill. We've got an ADU above a garage. That's terribly scary, isn't it? No, it's not. It could fit right into the backside of a lot or in an alley. A lot of these are based on what we see here already in existence in Michigan. It can slide right in. Okay. Oh, I did remember that we had this. Was it that simple? Could I have just stopped there? No. Putting out a good idea doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get built, does it? No. It doesn't. So we're looking at lumber, labor, land, and loans. And you all work in housing or you care about housing, so I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. But I am telling you that we have the ability to look at new infill in a different way. There are indoor stick-built facilities that are building modular homes. And this is not your grandmother's double wide. These are very, very stably built houses that can be transported to places where you have labor shortages. They can be built in indoor conditions so that the quality of construction is tremendously high, and it can provide stable employment for people in a specific geographic area as opposed to having to move all over the place. We know that there's other opportunities for hacking the stack or layering in different incentives and different tools, and that can be talked about by a couple of other people here, but I want to make sure that I reference it to you, because when you look at this as a complex problem, it's going to require a complex solution. But there's a lot of different ways that you can put them together, and it is possible. And so where are people building these things? Well, Kalamazoo is one of them. This is from a Strong Towns article. You can go Googling. And it shows us that new infill construction is possible. Kalamazoo has created its own type of pattern book homes portfolio, working with Oak Street Designs, and so is Grand Rapids. They're in the possibility of actually doing construction very soon. Other communities considering this, you saw Sterling Heights earlier. They're working in partnership with the Chaldean Foundation and a local developer to try to provide permanent supportive housing or affordable housing options for people who are new Americans. And then we're also seeing the possibility of new construction in a lot of other places right now. You're just walking up to the line. We're about to see it tip over. We're going to start seeing this happen. That's in Grand Rapids right there. We're just challenging you to continue to visualize how are we enriching our existing land use so that we're going to allow us to continue to have walkable neighborhoods, all the reasons why you want to be in those downtown adjacent neighborhoods and not necessarily continue to eat up additional land for lower level, larger lot developments. And that gets us actually back to Sarah.
Thank you, Melissa. I encourage you to, you saw Melissa's website up there a couple different times. I encourage you to go look at it, especially the discussions on what it looks like for infill housing. A lot of times we hear that we can only do big multifamily developments, but a lot of times, as she said, there's so much infill right around our own communities that's utilized every day, and we have the ways to continue to do that and do it correctly. So that's a great way to talk into that. Now I'm going to flip it over to Sarah Lucas with the Office of Rural Prosperity. And I'm just going to introduce Sarah by saying that I wouldn't have been able to introduce Sarah or the Office of Rural Prosperity 2 years ago because it didn't exist. And it is a huge, huge success for our region that we do have this amazing office. And there's some people in this room who have been asking for this. One of them's right next to Sarah. One of them is in the audience. For a long, long time. And it took a lot of work for us to get here, but we have now an office in state government that represents rural needs, not just ours, but every rural community in Lower Michigan and the Upper Peninsula. So with that, let's talk what your office does as far as to support housing development, because you do more than just housing. That's what's fantastic. But let's talk with that one.
Okay. Thank you, Nikki. And it's nice to see you all this afternoon. I like Tony, see many familiar faces, and I'm always happy to come to Petoskey and talk about housing, as I have done for so many years. So the Michigan Office of Rural Prosperity is housed now in the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, or LEO. We've moved from Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, which is where the office was originally housed when it was created a couple years ago. And the song remains the same despite the different agency that we're housed under. Like Nikki said, we're not talking with communities just about housing, we're talking about every issue under the sun. So when we visit communities, the conversation might be about broadband connectivity, it might be about childcare or housing or transportation or infrastructure or workforce needs, you name it. The funny part of all that is we are a 3-person office, 4-person office. And so we try to manage expectations a little bit that our office really isn't intended to solve all of those issues. We know how complex they are, and we know how expensive they are as issues. We also know that there are a lot of agencies that are working effectively in different ways to address those needs. But we also recognize that they are very interconnected, as you all know. And so one role of our office is to be a sort of liaison and connection point between agencies, topics, and communities. So we're sort of in between rural communities and state government, as well as other partners like philanthropy and universities and nonprofits and federal partners. So we're always kind of talking back and forth with those different partners at the local, state, and federal level, making sure that our funding partners and our program partners like the state and the feds understand what rural communities need. And on the other hand, talking to rural communities to make sure that everyone knows what resources are available from those different partners and what emerging best practices might be. Because one thing that we have learned over the last couple of years of the office's existence is that it's most effective for rural communities to learn from each other. There's really just a strong interest and a strong need for rural communities to be more connected in general, and a lot of desire to learn from peers. And so that's one thing that our office does, is try to make sure that we're connecting different communities who are working on similar topics. And everyone, I assure you, is working on housing. It doesn't matter where you go or what the conversation is, it always comes back to housing. And so that's one, I think, pivotal role that our office plays, is just making sure that we look at these issues in a more coordinated, holistic way across agencies, across topics. The other thing I think that needs to be said is it's not a given that there's an understanding of what rural communities need and how they're addressing issues like housing in rural communities, and what the specific program or how the specific program should be shaped in order to be most effective in rural communities. So we try to talk to rural communities, understand exactly what it is that they're working with and dealing with, and communicate that back to decision makers when they're making decisions about funding or programming. And again, a universal theme in all of the conversations that we have with rural communities is that there is a real capacity barrier for those communities to access funding. And there are different reasons for that, and I won't get into it in a lot of detail right now. I'll talk a little bit more about it later on. But whether we're talking about applying for dollars for broadband or childcare or housing, there are challenges to rural communities in accessing funds because of how the programs are written and because of the administrative burden on these small rural communities that have very small staffs, or in many cases no staff. It's all volunteer-led, or they don't have match dollars to apply for the program, and et cetera, et cetera. So our office has focused really heavily on building the capacity in rural communities to do some of this work, and that looks different in different communities. What we have seen across the state is that the communities that have been successful in addressing issues like housing are the ones that have planned to deal with housing and that have coordinated with partners. And that's why this area is so far ahead of the game, to Tony's point. It's very true, because you've been talking about housing and you've been planning to build housing for years in Emmett County, and you're starting to see the fruits of that labor. Not every community has that kind of planning background, and they also don't have the same level of coordination and collaboration that you do in this community. And it makes it a lot harder for communities to identify needs and develop projects to have in the pipeline to apply for grant dollars down the road. So that's one message that we try to communicate, is that we really need to help communities plan, build pipelines of projects, and build the capacity in order to apply for these grant dollars. It always, when I talk about it, it always sounds very abstract when we're talking about such an immediate need, and people living on couches or outside, and we're talking about a very long drawn out process. So I always say it kind of with a note of apology, but. We've seen so many success stories of communities who have been able to make a difference by being deliberate and strategic about how they address that need. So when we had some dollars for a grant program, we structured it around helping communities build plans and capacity. The Rural Readiness Grant Program provided awards of $50,000 to communities for any issue, from housing to transportation to childcare to behavioral health. Didn't really matter what the topic was, as long as the community was building plans, capacity, or partnerships to address that issue. So we awarded 40 grants last year, $1.8 million. A lot of those grants, probably about a third of them, were housing related. And some of our funding actually came from MISHDA for that program, because there was such a strong response from communities around housing issues that we kind of went to MISHDA and asked for their partnership in supporting some of those projects, and they came to the table for it. So that's been a really powerful learning experience for us, because we're starting to see the outcomes of those projects already. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but just want to say, kind of to Nikki's point, as we're continuing to evolve, we're learning from communities as they're doing this work and building programs in response to that. So the Rural Readiness Grant Program has been a real highlight. The other thing I want to mention, just so you know what this image is that, as I was talking earlier about making sure that we're addressing rural community needs in a holistic way, we've put together a strategy called the Roadmap to Rural Prosperity that takes the feedback that we've gotten, the demographic and economic analysis that our office has done, and synthesize that into a statewide strategy that addresses key issues like housing and workforce and individual well-being, as well as local and regional capacity, in a way that's coordinated and connected across agencies. So we're using this as sort of a template for how we work with other agencies, and it also provides a lot of pathways for communities who are looking for the next step for themselves as well.
And I want to say too that just to highlight, so you said what 1.5 million in grants awarded last year. This was the first round. And what was the need? What was the total amount of need for those grants as requested?
$9 million.
So $9 million in asks came in. Round one. And keep in mind, based on the funding that this office has, I will say this, it is wonderful to see in the governor's budget recommendation that they have increased the funding for the Office of Rural Prosperity. I will say that there are many people that are asking for that number to be higher. Because it's still not enough to meet that $9 million need in our rural communities. Also wanted to say a thank you on behalf of Petoskey and our other entities and municipalities who applied for a rural readiness grant for a water infrastructure study and did receive it. That kind of collaboration is key and wonderful, and I'm just and Andrea Jacobs was a huge part of that happening in our communities. So those grants really do mean something. And the last thing I'm going to throw at you, Sarah, because it's kind of very new since we started talking with everything, is you might have heard, whether you're in the housing industry or you're just a housing community interested member, that rural communities are suddenly getting a tremendous amount of federal attention. You were just in DC. There are discussions now on federal levels and using, by the way, Michigan as an example for addressing rural needs. Is there anything you want to mention to that?
Yes, thank you. We are the best. That's it. Michigan is one of only a handful of states that has this kind of office. There's about 6 of them. And I was just in DC last month. The governor was there at the White House on Tuesday, actually, talking about some of the programming that we're building called really kind of under our rural readiness umbrella, where we're going to be sort of networking communities and resource providers more systemically while providing direct assistance to communities for early phase planning to help them build those project pipelines. So it is getting a lot of attention right now because there are so few, because there is such a need in rural communities, and because there's so much investment that's available, so many more opportunities for funding right now that rural communities really need to be prepared for. And I can't say that with enough urgency that we really need to have our rural communities ready with projects that are viable for these funding opportunities. And so that's one thing that our office is trying to do and to organize for and to work with rural communities on is building that preparedness, hence the name Rural Readiness. So I appreciate the call out, Nikki. Please stand by for more information on the Rural Readiness Network programming. We're actually kicking off the program on Wednesday with a webinar at 11. I'm happy to share more information on that with you. But really the idea is to build that kind of partner-to-partner exchange and make sure that rural communities are ready for the very specific funding opportunities that are coming down the pike, because they're not always black and white. There's a lot more flexibility and opportunity, I think, in some of the funding that's becoming available. Can I say another couple of things outside of how famous our office is nationally? I want to just take a moment to talk about some of the Rural Readiness Grant outcomes, because I think that really demonstrates in a way that I can't say in an abstract sort of fashion how much of a difference it makes to have the kinds of plans and capacity that you have built here in this community. And as Nikki mentioned, one of the awardees for the Rural Readiness Grants was Housing North, Little Traverse Bay Partnership, and a consortium of partners to do some infrastructure planning around how the housing needs specifically. And I want to say a couple things associated with that. One, infrastructure needs are a huge barrier for housing development in a lot of rural communities, and there's a lot of reason for that. Some of it is connected to where the buildable sites are in communities. The cost for extending infrastructure is prohibitive in a lot of developments, and there's not a lot of funding for new infrastructure or infrastructure and expansion. for enhancements or for maintenance and that kind of thing, there is. But when you're talking about building out infrastructure, it's hard to find funding for that, and it makes new development really expensive. So this region has been really proactive in terms of thinking through those challenges ahead of time, and it's so gratifying to see that kind of forethought and the kind of collaboration that this community has put together that I've lost track of how many times we've asked Andrea to join us to give presentations when we're invited to speak about housing at different conferences, because it is really a best practice that we're trying to encourage, is that kind of planning around infrastructure specifically in combination with local governments and nonprofits. So that's one thing I just want to call out. There's other examples in this region. Village of Mackinac City was another awardee that is trying to prepare some sites for development when we're supporting some of their pre-development costs. But another thing that we've really been emphasizing is the success that we've seen from the communities that have tried to build capacity for grant writing. And it was sort of a new model for that kind of work, but we have grantees that are community foundations, that are economic development organizations, regional planning agencies, local governments. All of them are trying different ways to build grant writing services and education into their regions. And since the grants were awarded, 6 months ago, those communities have already submitted over $13 million in grant applications. They've secured $2 million in grants. They've educated over 250 people in their communities. And I find this just so incredibly inspiring, because to me, it shows the level of capacity that exists in our rural communities if we're able to channel resources into the organizations that have the relationships and the knowledge and the understanding to make this stuff happen. The challenge, I think, for state programming in rural communities is often that it's different organizations that are leading this work in different ways. And so I just want to be clear that when we're talking about, I always use the word communities, and it's very broad and non-descriptive, but the reason is we're talking to so many different kinds of people. And that's another thing that this region has just really excelled at, is bringing all of those people to the same table. And you can really see the results in the work that's happening here.
Thank you, Sarah. Great updates there.
Jump in. No, I'm good. I just want to clarify a little bit here. I do speak and brag a lot all over the place about this collaborative grant that we have gotten in a couple of places in Emmett County. I don't take credit for it. The credit needs to go to City Manager Shane Horn for organizing that water sewer infrastructure study in collaboration with Resort Township and Bear Creek Township, thinking about developing capacity and water sewer expansion in a more holistic way, instead of sort of onesie by development, so that we can think about how our community grows in a way that's really intentional. So that's a study that was funded. That's all Shane and the City of Petoskey, Bear Creek Township, and Resort Township. And also up in Mackinac City, really quickly, just because it's fun to talk about, when they identified their priority sites. If you have a priority site and a developer comes in and says, here's what I'd like to do with it, usually or traditionally, they would do a lot of that sort of site prep, or that land surveys, the wetland delineation stuff, and then if and when that development did not happen, that information left with that developer. That was privately held information because they paid for it. And Mackinac City said, well, if these are our sites and we have identified them as priorities, then we should be able to offer that information to developers that come in. So they applied for the grant to fund that site surveys and the wetland delineation. So the village now owns that information, so that each developer could come in, submit a proposal, and then if that doesn't work out or the village says, no, thank you, we'd like to try something else, that information stays with the village. So that's another really powerful tool, and it also sort of dials down that cost for pre-development overall. So those are just the specifics there I wanted to dive in, because I don't know if all of you are familiar with how we were funded and what for in our community. And that's 2 out of, I think, only 3 in the region that we got in the 10 counties that we were able to get for that rural readiness grant. So that was really, really great.
She's like, I'm done now. I think what you just highlighted, though, too, is for those in the room that have no idea what some of the words were you just said, or why they matter. When somebody says, let's build housing, you don't just go build housing. There are years of steps and plannings. There are multiple people involved, your cities, your municipalities, the developer. There are so many things that have to be done, so many boxes to be checked. It's extremely expensive. That's why we're talking about where are the grants, where is the additional funding, where are the pattern book plans to get us there. More than anything, collaboration, collectiveness are key to being able to move that housing needle. And a lot of times, it takes a lot longer than we want it to for us to actually see the house built, to see the apartment complex stand. So we're going to get to that part, or where are some of our numbers coming, but that's something I want to point out, and that actually plays really well into Kent and Dawn. So they're going to kind of tag team a little bit here, talking for the Housing Michigan Coalition. And I'm going to start you guys off with one, what is it? And what purpose does it serve?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. Hi, everybody. Kent Wood. I own a consulting company and work with Housing North and help to represent them on really, I think, one of the coolest coalitions that I've been a part of so far in my 15 years of kind of working in and around government and advocacy, and that's the Housing Michigan Coalition. And it really kind of dates back to the COVID era, if you will, 2020, and it was an election year, and we just kind of kept, we know everybody was talking about housing then, and COVID really emphasized the need for having housing, having homes, having a place where you could be safe then. And so it was, I would say it took a very intense conversation and put it on steroids. And so we knew that, certainly folks at Housing North were hearing a lot about that. Dawn was hearing a lot from her members, the home builders, chambers were hearing a lot. Local units of government, the League, the Michigan Association of Counties, they were all hearing from their members on what are we doing. So everybody kind of had plans then, was kind of putting plans together on what are we going to do legislatively to try to move the needle around housing statewide. And, a number of us kind of started to figure that out, started to kind of put the dots together. It's like, okay, well, the chambers are working on something. The Municipal League's working on something big. The home builders have a lot of stuff. Maybe we ought to start talking together a little bit and kind of see if we can put the pieces together. And so, around 2020, again, 2020 was kind of when we started talking. 2021, Sarah was the head of Housing North then, and was really part of the core team in bringing this together, along with Dawn and one of Melissa's coworkers at the League, and just to try to figure out, okay, what does everybody want to do? Where can we find consensus? Not just among our groups here, but what could we go out statewide and really start to develop a coalition of, quite honestly, non-traditional partners. We joke about this all the time, but in most states, Dawn's group, the home builders, the municipal leagues in other states, the local units of government, associations in other states, they absolutely despise
They don't get along
other.
very well, let's just say.
Thank you. That's a good way to put that. They're not on each other's Christmas card lists, and so to have business and the chambers and housing nonprofits and municipal leagues and builders, the development community, kind of all together, pulling in the same direction was really, really key to some of the successes that we've had that we'll get to in a couple minutes
And
here.
I think the one thing that it showed was it wasn't just, and when I say a me problem, it wasn't a home builder problem, just a home builder problem. And so when you look at our executive committee with the Michigan Municipal League, Housing North, and the Grand Rapids Chamber, it really shows that connectivity, that if the Grand Rapids Chamber can't hire talent because there's no place to live, that impacts business in a community. And so then working with the MML, how do we look at incentives and how do we come together so that we show it's not just, it is a housing crisis, but it's not a home builder specific issue. It affects everybody in the community. So when we started kind of pulling together, we purposefully chose to go testify as a group so that when we were before committee, legislators saw home builders, they saw business, they saw municipal, and they saw nonprofits all sitting together. And to Kent's, comment, we didn't always agree on issues. And so for us to sit up there and talk about the need and how it impacted all of us at a high level, but in a very different way, it told our story very well, that it wasn't just a home builder issue, we want to build more homes, and we do, but it was a collective community issue as well.
Okay, so looking at that, and I'm looking up at your slides here, and we're talking about that, everyone needs housing. Obviously, that's a clear. Ken, I'll let you introduce this next slide.
Oh, it's Kent's favorite slide.
Don's pyramid scheme. Don. No, this is, I kid. This is a fantastic slide to show, really the impact of rising housing costs. However they rise, whether it's because of taxes, lumber costs, prices, however that is. Don, I'll let you take it here, but just a great great visual of that. But I did call it Don's pyramid scheme in front of a committee
in
one
committee,
time.
so he's no longer invited to Thanksgiving dinner when our coalition gets together. So this is a great slide that our National Association of Home Builders put together. It is Michigan specific. We like to talk about not only housing affordability, because of course you have to afford a home, right? But we like to talk about housing attainability. And this slide details like who can attain a home at certain house price points. So, clearly the higher you go up the pyramid, the fewer people can afford homes. But when you look at, I believe the average cost to build a new home in the state right now is around $350,000. Like, that knocks a ton of people out of that. And so we truly have an inventory issue. Tony talked about, how the average age of a home is about 50 years old in this state. We're going to show a couple additional slides as well. But this really shows like the lack of, the further up the kind of housing chain you go, the fewer people that can actually get into those homes. And so we truly do have an attainable issue, but everybody needs a place to live because tents don't work well in this state.
I'm gonna, whoops, there we go. So when we're looking at this one,
Yes. So
your predictions.
Yeah. So on average, we should be building between 25 and 30,000 new builds a year just to keep up with the needs across the state. We are only predicting about 14,000 single-family permits this year, and I always give legislators a few numbers just to put it in perspective. In 2005, there were roughly, I want to say like 54,721 single-family permits pulled in this state, roughly. By 2007, that number had dropped to 15,000, and by 2009, that number had dropped to about 6,900. So we took a dramatic drop, and we've slowly been on the I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And so from 2009 until we're in 2024, we've never crested above a previous year. So we started in 2009 at about 6,900, and how many years later we're only going to hit about 14,000. Now that's just single family permits. It's not multifamily, but that truly does show we have a serious inventory problem in our state.
And when we talk about numbers in a little more of a specificity to our county, we announced these numbers last year. Andrea, they're handing it off to you to let you, it's you specific.
Yeah. Well, I think the most important statistic here, and I will say this is the local dashboard that is on Housing North's website. using the data from our housing needs assessment. I encourage any of you to go. The full county report is on there, the county brief is on there, and then these dashboards are on there as well. But the number, to Dawn's point about inventory, is that 0.2%. Now, that's way below 1% a vacancy. That means housing available of all types in Emmett County at all. Way below 1%. In a healthy housing market, that number should be between 5 and 9%. And that's what we mean about inventory. That means across the board, across the income spectrum, no matter what, people don't have a choice right now. They aren't able to match their needs with what's available because nothing is available. Mm-hmm. And I think that one is the most staggering here for us, and it'll come up again later. I think the income numbers, they do change. They go up. Our average median income right now is even above the 67,354 number, which is pretty high. That's pretty high. And I think that when we talk about housing affordability and we talk about some of the rent numbers that are included there, those rent numbers are also very high. But the idea is that we still don't have anything to offer. So a lot of what we're looking for from an inventory standpoint, it spans the full spectrum of housing. We're just not building enough. Mm-hmm. And there are some other factors there, but I think this is a not static. Again, like Melissa was saying, this dashboard will change and be updated, and as you see zoning changes and things like that happening, you'll see those adjustments being made. But that's a tool that is also available on the resources on Housing North's website.
And I just want to mention real quick too, is we will start to talk about some of the new tools that are available statewide now, and why it was so important that that they were within 80 and 120% of the area median income. Nikki, if you can pop back to that last slide real quick. I'll point this out before we get moving. But like Andrea mentioned, so $70,000. It's that's pretty decent, right? And so I know I've had some local officials kind of pushing back on some of this stuff, saying like, well, why should we be helping people making $70,000 a year find housing? But if you look at these numbers, for those of you that have ever been in the housing market, good luck trying to make a play on a $400,000 home with $70,000, right? And so that is the challenge, is that even folks that are making a good living, and Tony mentioned doctors coming in earlier. Even doctors and some of their families are struggling to find housing that fits within their income spectrum too. And so we'll get to that a little bit later. But I think that really kind of points out part of the challenge that we're having, that developers are having in meeting those needs.
That's a Kent problem.
Yeah, that's a me problem.
All right, let's, and we're going to talk a little more about Emmett County numbers in just a minute. But I want to touch on something that I think is really important. We hear all the time, just build it. Why aren't you just building it? And if MISH is going to give us money, and MML is going to give us a pattern book, and there's federal grants out there, and our city just adopted all these new ways to utilize these funds and these programs, why aren't we just building it?
Right. Well, Nikki, to your point too, I mean, if we could build houses overnight, how easy would life be, right? Oh. It would solve our problem. But when I talk to our members, our builders and developers, it's a 2-year process by the time you find the land, you go through all the local government improvement, you do everything you need to do. And so one of the things, we talked to MISHDA and MEDC and all the the alphabets in Lansing, and we're like, housing is economic development. And so as the governor wants Michigan to be this economic destination, and you're going to bring all these new companies in, let's go back to the previous statement, our housing stock is aged, right? And in a minute, you'll see another aged statistic. It takes time to build those developments in a community. And so, some of the obstacles are building material costs. In COVID, we saw, plans that lumber cost doubled for the exact same plan in a Kalamazoo area where, literally doubled just for the lumber package. Didn't change the footprint, didn't change the plan, but the lumber went up. Shingles are going up. Heads up, if you need a new roof, I would do that sooner rather than later. And then you also look at the inventory on the time costs. Like to get windows, I just ordered a slider door for my house. It was going to be 10 weeks before it would even be available, let alone then finding the workforce to install it. So, the obstacles are building materials, regulatory obstacles at a local level, workforce needs, which we'll see a number, interest rates. These are all things that really builders have no control over, but we have to deal with them on a daily basis. And it takes time to get plan approval and go through the process and do what needs to be done. So, if our builders could build them overnight, I'm sure they would, but there are some obstacles that we need to overcome that we don't necessarily have control over.
And workforce being a big conversation for the
Yes.
Home Builders Association. And you hear us talking about it all the time. What do we do about workforce, the aging workforce? Who's going to build the next generation of houses? So go ahead and tell us about this.
So we actually purchased the licensed builders list from the state of Michigan, and we age matched it. And so I knew we had kind of an aging population. I love my members. They tend to be more experienced, as I like to call them. But if you look, and we pulled it for Emmett County as well, but if you look statewide, you look at who's coming in, those numbers don't jive with who's going out. And so, we are going to jump off a cliff sooner rather than later and not have the labor force. So if you don't have the labor force, guess what happens? Your workforce costs go up. Right? Because it's a supply and demand issue. And so we actually have a nonprofit called Skill to Build Michigan Foundation, and our kind of tag is cultivate, educate, and recruit. And we start with littles in kindergarten. We have a book called Billy the Build-A-Bear Builds a House. We have a new character called Katie Leads the Crew, and Katie's building a house for a family of dogs. For like K through 2, and then we have an activity book for grades 3 through 6. And then we were fortunate in the fiscal year 23 budget through the state of Michigan to get a grant where we could distribute to 570,000 8th through 12th graders in the state a book on skilled trades. So not just our skilled trades, because we are not the only issue seeing a shortage, but auto mechanics, horticulture, wind and solar, energy, hospitality, among the gamut, because we really want kids to see that they have options besides four-year college degree. And school counselors have been amazing with working with us. They're starting to kind of turn it around. But it's across the board, and we need all of that workforce. And so we were fortunate to get a grant. We're trying to get some money this year too, if there's any legislators listening, to continue with just the 8th graders on the same program. But like, these numbers are staggering when you look at them.
Terrifying, I think, is a really good
Yes.
word for it. They quite are. I will give a quick shout out to our wonderful ISD, our incredible high school, and our amazing college NCMC, who understand that this cliff is coming and are addressing it with their programming and opportunities for our students and our future students. We are very lucky and continue to support them as they continue to grow those programs.
And we actually have a certification recognized through MDE for kids and for career tech construction teachers who use our credential. So they need it for Perkins funding, and hopefully we'll be getting a whole bunch of new youngsters into the group.
You touched on it. I can click forward for you. All right, there we go. That's a Kent.
All right, so this, kind of starting to dive into a little bit, some of the changes, some of the new programs out there. I do love especially this chart on the bottom here, because it kind of puts some numbers to some terms I think a lot of you are familiar with, but I think sometimes a lot of people in the communities don't always know what this means. What's affordable housing? What do they mean by that? What do you mean by workforce housing? And it also gets into one of the big challenges that the state had and continues to have in terms of what programs were available for what income ranges. So you can see, green and yellow here, anywhere from 0% of the area median income to 60% of the area median income, typically referred to as affordable housing or kind of your low income and your low income housing. The red there, attainable housing, kind of anywhere along that spectrum. It's a big spectrum too, from 60% of the area median income to 120% of the area median income. So it's not really until you get over 120% of the AMI when you start to get into purple there, which is market rate housing. Basically your your traditional financiers, will finance in purple. Anything under purple though becomes more of a challenge to finance in the traditional manner, and so that's where developers need, start going to MISTA, start going to the Fed, start coming to some of these other programs that are out there. The huge challenge that we have had and that we are continuing to make progress on is that up until just a couple of years ago, we really had nothing in the red. So no programs that would assist developers or projects that were, especially in that 80% to 120% AMI range. And that is a major, major part of your workforce. When you go back, Nikki, just real quick to that slide before that showed, your major areas of employment. I mean, just about 100% of these folks are kind of making, definitely in that 80 to 120% AMI range.
And I think the other thing you see too is if you have the funds to play in the market rate, right in that purple section, because there's no inventory, that tends to bump you down to the houses that fall into your work. It's that domino effect. And so when we talk about that attainability and the need for inventory, that's why as the Housing Michigan Coalition is kind of focused on that red, but you also need to have the inventory so that people who can play in that fair market rate can be in that without bumping down into the workforce, because then it just continues to domino people down into the previous.
And we need all of it, because Tony mentioned at the very beginning, even the wealthier folks can't find home. They don't have enough options too. And as Don was saying, if they can't find it, then they start competing for the lower amount homes and apartments that are out there. And then down and down we go.
And I think it's something that's very understandable in this community when a lot of people know that, we've heard stories, horror stories all across the state, but you hear the stories of somebody going to buy a house because they're finally going to buy their first home, or they're going to upgrade, and the cash buy comes in before they can even make the offer that's well over what the asking price is, because it's a swoop down. It is, to Dawn's point, it's that domino effect happening. So I'm going to, instead of the scary stuff that makes everybody's stomach crumble, let's give you the floor to talk a little bit about what are we wanting to see to alleviate some of that, especially when it comes to funding and availabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just back real quick to, kind of how the coalition all came together, in some of the first things that the coalition was able to achieve from a statewide level. We knew, again, when you have kind of a diverse coalition, as we are, we knew that we really wanted to target, local communities, local units of government. Again, we were hearing a lot from local communities who were saying, we're having housing issues, we want to get involved, but really we don't have any legal way of getting involved. There are no programs that that local units of government can use to help with the housing situation. And so, we kind of settled on a framework of three things. We knew that we wanted them to be opt-in, so we didn't want to force communities, force employers, force developers to use any of these, but make it available. Wanted them to be locally controlled, and we wanted them to be flexible also to meet different local and different community needs, different building needs that were out there. And so, we kind of started out with a list of 30 plus ideas. I think we eventually narrowed it down to about seven or eight.
7 that we thought would be very easy to get through the legislature.
Yeah. And that we were kind of all able to find consensus on, and we were able to get 4 across the finish line. 4 new tools, so 2 new tools, 2 programs that hadn't existed before, and then 2 expanded tools, being the neighborhood enterprise zone and pilots, or payment in lieu of taxes. So, I think a lot of you are definitely familiar with the with the bottom 2. The newer tools were based on economic development incentives, largely for industry that had existed. That again, we're kind of like, well, can't we take that and use that for housing as well? And then, so that was in 2022. Dawn kind of mentioned, hey, this should be easy. We've got consensus across a wide diverse of
And we had bipartisan
partners.
support, which I think
Yep.
is really important to mention. We had Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate that came together, and for the 4 bills that were passed, 2 were senators from the Republican side, 2 were senators from the Democrat side. But they took ownership of their bills and really worked well with us and took the politics out of it, because housing really shouldn't be a political issue. Like, when you go fill out a mortgage, nobody asks you what your party affiliation is. And so, we kind of get stuck sometimes in this quagmire of Lansing of the politics. But, where we're at, from, Marquette to Traverse City to Petoskey to Monroe to, Benton Harbor, everybody needs housing. It doesn't matter if you are represented by a Republican or Democrat. And so we always stress that housing really should not be a political issue, because everybody needs housing at some level, whether it's a rental, a condo, a townhome, a single-family home, whatever that is and whatever that looks like for your needs. It really shouldn't matter, the political affiliation. And so we were very blessed to have 4, and then others too. We had House members from the Republican side and the Democrat side. The Senate just tended to move a little quicker.
Plenty of others too who were like, hey, why didn't you ask me?
Yeah.
I would have done a bill. Why didn't you ask me? So that's been good. So we were finally able to get those finished up at the very end of 2022. Last year, 2023, Tony mentioned the residential TIF that passed last June. And then also in last year's budget, we did all work together to get a $5 million appropriation in that budget for communities, local units of government to apply for grant funding to work on their zoning and their master plans to make them more housing friendly.
All right, the graphs.
The graphs, and very fitting that we're in an art center for this beautiful.
I think we
graphic
should give
work here.
credit where credit is due. Josh with the Grand Rapids Chamber
Yes.
came up with these. So
It has Josh's name all over it.
Yeah, but and you'll see in a minute though. This is kind of this the gray represents our current trajectory, so our current trend on housing, and I guess we use this to highlight a point, and you can go to the next one here, Nikki, and that is we're nothing that we've done, nothing that we're doing is going to be that silver bullet, that magic wand that's going to solve everything. Especially as now we have passed and we've got all of these new incentive and funding and financing opportunities for housing. So the next thing that we're really starting to look at is zoning and regulations, both kind of at a local and at a state level, and how those have an impact. And really we're just like if we make some micro growth in all of these areas. Again, we kind of use this to highlight that it doesn't look like much today, but if you project this out 10, 15 years, what 5 new units in a community per year will do over time, when you might only have 1 because you made a zoning change, or because you adopted a payment in lieu of taxes ordinance. Over the next, again, 10, 15, 20, 50 years, what kind of an impact that's going to have, not just on our region, but statewide as well. Because who remembers how many units short we are in this state? 190,000. Here we go. Who said that? Well done. So we can't do it. You saw Dawn's chart. We've only got about 15,000 permits that are being pulled this year, right? And the Emmett County needs about 3,500 over the next 4 or 5 years. So let's say you need about 1,000 units per year. Only about 15 statewide are being pulled. You can see how competitive statewide then it is for these resources, for these materials. And so again, if we can continue to incrementally make growth in some of these different areas and providing financing opportunities and having good tax policies or local units of government getting involved, in a favorable tax lens on some of these, over time, it is going to continue to add up.
Thank you, guys. All right. I think Ken's going to have to say something again in a second, but I want Andrea to take over a little bit and bring it down a notch. I know you need the clicker. That's a lot of control for me to give that to you. So I'm going to let you kind of finish up real quick. This is a more hyper-local look about where we at and what are we doing, and we're even going to talk about numbers in the pipeline, which is an extremely important number to hear. So go for it.
Well, no kidding. I'm going to stand up a little bit because it's been a minute, and we're going to jazz it up a little. But also want to step away from the tablecloths, which I inadvertently match today. So I want to give a little distance there. So for those of you who don't know, I'm the Emmett County Housing Ready Program Director for Housing North. Housing North is a regional nonprofit. We represent the 10 northwest counties of Lower Michigan. Our full name is the Northwest Michigan Rural Housing Partnership, so that goes a little bit farther into what we do, which is awareness, advocacy, and capacity and resources. So these are words that you have already heard today. They are repeats, and they are sort of a combination of capacity, advocacy, and awareness. This is the whole panel here today, not because we want to duplicate efforts, but because we want to amplify those, and because we want to prove here today that through the statewide housing plan initiative and the role of Housing North as the regional housing partnership, sort of the lead liaison for our Region D, we have been able, this is just resources on the website, we're not going to go into all of this, but I want to talk about the importance of and reiterate what was mentioned today. The reason why this is working so well, this statewide plan that then looks at the regions and says, what do you need? And then the regions collect all of our local sort of stakeholders in that conversation and say, what are you doing? Share with me what's happening. What are you working on? How can we help? And I don't know if you all are old enough to remember Jerry Maguire. Help me help you. Help me help you. And so that goes from the state to the region to the local, and that in turn goes back to the regional partners like Office of Rural Prosperity back up to the state, MISHDA, Office of Rural Prosperity, MML. So this conversation is circular, and that plan is keeping that in place, and that help me help you. Show me the money! But that's not enough. That's not enough, because even if I had all the money in the world right now, like we've been talking about today, we haven't been quite ready. Up until now, the housing conversation has looked a little bit more like this. Sort of generally accepted urgency, although maybe not completely. There's a few at the back that aren't sufficiently motivated there. But not necessarily coordinated toward the same goal or finish line, right? So what if we had given this guy the money? See ya. I don't know where he's going with it, and I don't know if we're working toward the same goals here, right? And so this panel here today, I think, and what we were trying to do is help you in Emmett County understand that it's not just us having this conversation locally, but it's the whole state trying to align ourselves, trying to orient ourselves toward the same goal. First, we have to articulate that goal, right? Like, that's important. And secondly, we have to be sufficiently motivated. We have to understand the why behind what we're doing every day, all day long. Because even though it's set up, it's not a perfect metaphor, because it's really not a competition, but we're all pulling, like Kent said, toward the same finish line. And it's also insufficient because it's not really a straight line. If you can just imagine a little bit here, well, my favorite one in the middle. I say what I want about the pace of government, but I'll tell you what. These guys, slow and steady, they're doing it, we're getting there. But if you imagine like a little hurdle in front of each of those guys, they're all going to handle it a little bit differently. It's all going to feel a little more or less possible for each of those partners. And maybe these cast of characters is things like the local unit of government and a development team and maybe the community foundation, or maybe it's a combination of all of these statewide and regional letters that you see before you today. All of these partners are working together, moving toward the same goal. So sometimes, if we look at it and we've established it's not a straight line, maybe there's hurdles involved, or maybe it's more like an obstacle course. Or have you ever seen American Ninja Warrior? Like a gauntlet? So as each of us in these roles in our organizations and in our communities have felt like, in turn, the athlete that is running said gauntlet and getting bashed to absolute heck or into the water in our strategizing or our training. Sometimes we're their coach or the trainer, and we're really trying to help our team or our person or our athlete get forward through this. And it's not easy, and we don't quite know how to tell them how to do it, but we're going to cheer them on, right? Sometimes we're the cheering section. Sometimes we're watching these developments happen, and we're going to cheer it on, and we're going to really, really hope and pray. And sometimes we're going to see them land in the water, and sometimes we're going to see them get a bloody nose. But to Tony's point earlier, and also, all of these partners here today we're learning from each other, right? When somebody falls in the water, we look at that and we say, okay, let's try it again. Does that mean that we need to change the program? Does that mean that we need to go back to Misha and say, you guys did this wrong? That is impossible for us. We are too small. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the matching funds. We cannot make this work. Or do we look at it and go, that other community did it wrong, but we know how we're going to do it instead. And so next time when it's our turn, we try and we get a little bit farther. And so this is part of what we do all day long, every day in Housing Ready. And I think that it's important to go back to the point that Sarah made for us as far as comparing ourselves to other communities, learning from both their successes and their failures. And there's a couple I'd like to point out specifically. The village of Frankfort looks and feels a lot like us. And they are doing some incredible things at the local government level, at the local area nonprofit level. They are really, really moving forward there, and some really cool, creative ways to attack this. Now, I will tell you, they're 20 years in. So this isn't a light switch transformation even for them. The village of Cassopolis has made themselves absolutely famous for bringing themselves back from the brink. But a community like Midland has really, really felt the pain of what it means to not be ready. Because when you lose $100 million economic investment, manufacturing expansion, because you can't house any of the workers, and they walk away, it hurts. So, question 2, Nikki.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Nobody else has gone by their question.
No, nobody has. That's why I'm
I
just
read
letting
the
you guys.
assignment.
I'm just watching.
I read the assignment.
All right, so this is a fun one. The current
not. This one hurts.
state
This
of
makes me wanna
housing,
cry.
this one hurts everybody's heart, but it's got to be talked about. So the current state of housing affordability and the different occupation types in Emmett County. And what does this mean about workforce? What does this truly have to do with? And I think this is the one that you say it hurts your heart. It hurts my heart the most.
It is.
This one's tough.
This, I talked last year when the housing needs assessment for Emmett County, well, for our region, but also for Emmett County came out, and I dropped a couple of statistics. This chart is one of the most impactful that came out of that sort of statistical kind of analysis or alignment. If you take a look at Emmett County, we're kind of right in the middle here. So this is the majority of our workforce as far as housing is concerned, or as far as our economy is concerned. So the red X's are, in Emmett County, you can rent. If you can afford to rent, you get a green check. And if you can afford to own, you get a green check. And that is a lot of red X's. Okay, fair enough. Well, Emmett County is expensive. As we know, half of our workforce commutes from outside of Emmett County. That's 6,700 people every single day coming from outside of Emmett County. What happens if they go outside of Emmett County? Can they afford that either? So what happens when our office clerks, secretaries, line truck, accountants, maintenance, landscaping, it goes all the way from sales to, God, I don't know, every single thing almost, with the exception of a few doctors and architects, I guess. That was at the top of the list there, right? Where are they going? They're going to go downstate? Are they going to go out of state? Are we going to lose them completely? Okay, well, from an economic standpoint, we've established that we have a blue economy that's unique to our region. It's even more intense here in Emmett County. It's tourism, it's service, hospitality. So let's take a look at it across the spectrum from the job sector, retail sales, cashiers, fast food, waiters, waitresses, cooks, bartenders, receptionists, stock order fillers, teachers' assistants, janitors, and housekeeping. They can't afford to live anywhere in our region. What does that do to our tourism economy? What does that do to our hotels? What does it do to our businesses? What does it do to our shops? This is a really tough chart. And this is why when you talk about that sort of average home price and understanding that throughout the state of Michigan, but especially in Emmett County, in order to ratchet that down into the range that our workforce can afford, that is $100,000 per unit of subsidy. And last year we talked about this. This is not a thing we can buy our way out of. We cannot finance $100,000 per unit and multiply that by 3,400 units just in Emmett County. Whose pocket is that coming out of? So that's why we talk about things like zoning changes, and we talk about things like pre-development costs, and we talk about ways to leverage some of this money that makes it more effective, because ultimately we are trying to ratchet down that end user price, whether it's rent or for sale, but that has to start from the very beginning. It has to start from where we plan to put it, where it has water and sewer so that we don't have to dig a well and septic every single time. Those are the kind of things that make things a little bit cheaper. And it happens before we've even thought of the project. Question number 3. No, I'm still on this one. Don't push me. They had all the time they needed. This is an Emmett County thing, man. It's my universe.
And she wants to throw a t-shirt at somebody.
I want to throw a t-shirt. So I want to ask you right now, this one's another one that's going to hurt. Oh, this is a bad one. We're going to keep going. It'll get funnier after this. Can anybody guess how many? We heard our affordability stat at 30%, right? 30% traditionally, historically, that's not a new statistic. That's how much you should be spending on your housing costs. Can anybody guess how many of our residents in Emmett County are spending more than 50% of their income on housing? Close. You know what? I love this. 10,000%. It feels, I love it you guys are guessing really, really high because it feels really, really difficult. And every single one of us knows somebody that is in a world of hurt as far as they have a place, but it's not obvious that they're going to be able to keep it, and it's not something that meets their needs, right? 1 out of every 4 of our Emmett County households are paying more than 50% of their income on housing. That's more than just one person that you know. 1 out of every 4 of our households in Emmett County, 25% are paying not just more than 30%, but more than 50% of what they make on their housing costs. Nobody gets a t-shirt. There'll be more tests at the end. So the idea of what that does economically to us and what that does to our business owners takes us to the next slide. Because we can talk about it from the experience of the residents themselves, but what we want to do is amplify it and extend it into what impact this has on our community, our businesses and our business owners. 74% of our business owners, our employers, whether they're small or large, are negatively impacted by the lack of housing. Almost 80% of employers would be more likely to hire more workers if housing was resolved. That means that not only are they struggling to exist, but they cannot even imagine trying to grow. And so even if they could, and even if they were in a business and they were well suited and placed in their market for a high demand for their goods or services, they don't have the possibility of meeting those. And that means a lot, because if our business owners leave, can't make it, figure that there's someplace else that's easier to make it happen, or whether it's downstate or out of state, where does that leave us? So to go back to one of the other options that were the other things that we noted earlier, as far as inventory is concerned, something else that's impacting that, and we mentioned it, as far as the cash buyers coming in, that are not just, you know, second homeowners or wealthier individuals. Maybe they just have the ability to buy something faster and quicker than we do. But in Emmett County, a third of our residences, 7,000 of our homes right now are second homes. They're empty. They're vacation homes. They belong to somebody. They're not vacant. Our current demand is 3,400 units, and we have 7,000 homes in Emmett County sitting as second homes. This is the pressure that we're under. I'm not saying that those, you know, that those are all for us. I'm just saying that this is why we look around and we see lots and lots and lots of homes. And we think that everybody's, you know, doing fine, but these homes are dark most of the year. This time of year, it's very lively. But most of the year, our streets are dark, our communities are quiet, because a third of our homes don't belong to our year-round residents. And this is what's impacting that pressure. So to your point, as far as rehabbing homes or, you know, creating opportunities through existing buildings, that's why we have development pressure. We need to build new, because the ones that are already here don't belong to us. And that's okay. Because the reason why we're here has a lot to do with our summer residents and has a lot to do with our tourism economy, and we love that. I'm not trying to be hateful about it, but I am trying to draw that point out of why do we need to keep building when it feels like there are places to live. And that's why. So that's the end of our very sad statistics.
Can you please provide happy statistics, Andrea?
Yes. Look at this. Ta-da. So I want to go back to our little tortoise real quick. Our little tortoise in the race, and I want you to imagine a little cape on that tortoise, because our local partners in Emmett County have been very slowly and surely doing this work and getting themselves ahead. And not only ahead for our region, but honestly, Emmett County is the tip of the spear as far as pulling our region with us. We are thinking, we are planning, and we are doing the work. So what you heard today is some of these $230,000 in grant support for planning and readiness. Over 5 different units of government just in the past year. That's probably, it's probably not even accurate. It's probably more than that. 9 new master plans. Now, it takes a lot for a rural community to completely redo their master plan. Usually that's something they have to pull off the wall every 5 years and just check up on it and say, yep, looks good, that's fine. To redo it, it costs quite a bit of money, and they need quite a bit of help. So they have to have a consultant come in, and it's a very important process, but it's not one that our rural communities are used to doing on a regular basis. 9 of our communities have redone their master plans completely, or are in the process of doing that. We have 3 redevelopment-ready communities in Emmett County. 8 communities are actively redoing their zoning, or at least evaluating it for zoning reform with mindfulness toward housing or housing readiness. We have 5 sub-area plans, including intersections, corridors. Those are things that are sort of just a higher resolution plan for an area, whether it's a neighborhood or whatnot. And we have 2 major water sewer studies to prepare for upgrades. To Sarah's point, applying for larger grants, in order to get federal monies to do some of these things, we have to have the studies in place. So those are things that aren't big and sexy as far as developments are concerned, but they are the work that is absolutely crucial for us to be ready when something comes up, when a program opens. Then Emmett County slams down there and they say, we got this, we're ready, we've got something. We know what we need, we know exactly what we're going to use it for. We have shovels ready to go on the ground, but we just didn't know how we were going to fund it. And here comes some of these programs. And not only that, but a lot of the hearts and minds and a lot of the educational component that we've gone through in the past few years have gotten our communities themselves ready to step into this space as a development partner, so that when some of these tools come down, tax incentive tools or some sort of policy changes that can be made, we're ready. And we're ready right at the front of the gate. We're the first ones in, to Tony's point. So we take a look at this incentive and we say, we know what to do with that. We know where to put that investment. This redevelopment of Maple Block Flats is going to change our lives. And it's not just a matter of what that represents at an individual level for their property taxes, but what that represents as a resident of our community. Multiply that by the circulation of capital. Multiply that by the way that they can participate in schools, in their governments, in their communities, in their arts and creative energies. What does it mean to have those people a part of our town? So I would like to say, really quickly, all of this readiness work, when it comes down to, like you say, we want to talk about the developments, we want to recognize that, but the development, or this readiness work, goes to us sharing that vision, us spending the time to say, what do we want, where do we want it, and how are we willing to support that when it comes? Because what that does is it puts the ball into the private sector or the developers to come into the community and say, yeah, we can do that. If you know what you want and you know where you want it, we can do that. And then they come in with the expertise and they take it from there a little bit, but we remain partners. So I want to say it's really important, and I want to say I'm really, really, really proud of our communities. And for those of you who work within and for local units of government that are here in this room today, can we offer them a round of applause? Because they have worked really hard.
And Don wants to steal your microphone for a second, but I want to highlight a very important number right here. 1,500 Over 1,500 units are in the pipeline. Now, we know the big ones. We've heard the names. We've talked about them endlessly to you for the last 3 housing town halls. And of course, that is our incredible Habitat for Humanity and their continued work for Foundations for Our Future. Lofts at Lumber Square, over 60 units at the old Gruler property. We've heard lots of talk lately about Michigan Maple Block and what that will look like, over 200 units out there. Pine Pond, incredible new development right off of Pickerel Lake Road. That one is incredible as well. Those are the ones we keep hearing about a lot. But there's a lot more going on. And if you want to know more about those and you're wondering where to go look right now, well, I can tell you the wonderful collaboration with the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership, which you can sign up for a newsletter for if you have not. That website is updated every quarter as we get new reports of what's moving in the community, what's there. You can sign up for the newsletter that we send out as well to make sure that our community knows what's building, what's stalled, what's all the good things. So I'm going to let you say whatever you want and see if we can get some questions in.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on something Andrea said. There's legislation moving through the House right now. Representative Grant out of Grand Rapids has a bill that would actually require, as municipalities are looking at their master plan, to plan for housing for the future, which is a brilliant idea. And then also to have individuals on their planning commission that actually come from the building and development community so that there can be input. The other thing that I want to mention quickly is, as we talk about, the astronomical cost of housing, and we kind of alluded to it a little bit on the slide, codes that come in, building codes, energy codes. We are in a round right now of codes where they are looking at suggesting that every new residential home have a fire suppression system. If you don't know what that term means, it means sprinklers. That will be extremely expensive to the cost of a new home, and every time you increase the cost of a home by $1,000, you put about 4,500 families out of that housing market. And so I just wanted to put in those 2 real quick plugs.
Okay, and I see hands, and we have 5 minutes, and I still want questions, but I know there's 2 other, what we're kind of telling you right now is there's things that you can call your legislator about and say, are you housing friendly? Let's not have that legislation. What other ones are we really concerned about right now? SB 293, if you're looking at that one, that allows all that wonderful money from MISTA that Tony was talking about to be utilized in rural communities, because right now, guess what? It can't be. We don't have walkability scores. We're missing some other things on that as well, and it's also missing funding everybody that meets our needs. And MISTA has a problem lending right now. I think that's House Bill 5032. I'm looking at you on that one, Kent. Being able to lend more. So there's ways you can talk to Kent, you can talk to myself. There are a lot of legislative bills that make sure your local elected officials that are in Lansing know are important to housing, and you want to see them go through a simple phone call that says, hey, I was at this housing town hall. I hope you're voting yes on this because I hear it's going to help housing in my community. Just a quick plug for that. And then Melissa, I'm going to give it to you and we'll see if we have any questions.
Okay. Well, I have a T-shirt that I need to throw at somebody. So let me just ask you real quick. With that wonderful slide that was up here a few minutes ago with lots of different websites to go to, did anybody pull up any of those websites? Oh. Okay. Thank you. You get a T-shirt.
There you go.
I encourage you to pick up. To pull up all those different websites. One of them is at the mml.org, our Pattern Book Homes project. In there is a zoning reform toolkit. It helps you figure out how do you allow the type of housing that we already want. mml.org. Look up Pattern Book Homes.
And we will be putting this as well as the recording on the chamber website so that you can get all those wonderful little QR codes.
And I'm going to give you 2 more that you're going to put in your packet when you send it out.
You're going to give them. We'll get them all up there for you.
I love hearing about how housing is one piece in a larger community infrastructure, larger community wealth building, a larger thriving communities effort in our Michigan communities. And one of the things that we're trying to do is help people be able to find those funding sources. So we have from the league, funded by Sarah's wonderful parent agency, Leo, we have the MI Funding Hub, and it is an aggregation of a lot of different federal and state funding sources. And we also have the help desk so that people can call in and say, hey, can you help me with this? We're there too. The other one, when we're talking about how are we stacking up a lot of those incentives that Kent and the Housing Coalition has been trying to advance, is the Turner Center, Terner Center, and it's out in California, and it has a question of, does it pencil developer math? Helping you understand if you're using those incentives, is that lost tax revenue, or are you just deciding where you're going to put your tax revenue? How are you seeing that impact in a developer stack? We're going to send that out to you as well, Turner Center. Does it pencil? Terner. You're
going to have lots more updates than you can handle. We got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Do we have any burning questions? Yes, sir. And I'll give you that. I'll trade. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Christian Picciolini, Resort Township resident, also candidate for supervisor. Nikki, thank you for putting together an amazing panel with a really critical set of issues for our region. 2 really quick yes-no questions. One, have we thought about, we talked a lot about coalitions. Have we thought about kind of unconventional coalitions with energy companies, waste management companies, gas companies, even mortgage lenders to help fund some of the infrastructure that will ultimately benefit them financially in the end? And 2, are there any good examples of communities who are doing the balance of short-term rentals and affordable rentals?
Did you see everybody's face on that last one?
Thank you.
That's kryptonite, man. Pardon? That's kryptonite.
Yeah, that's a dangerous subject. There's a lot of there's a lot of watching going on. I will say that. I will give our legislators and our local elected officials a lot of credit because you've got to look at a lot of ways to look at short-term rentals, and I am not going to be caught on camera issuing an opinion at this point in time with 30 seconds left. And I will say that the concept of more collaborations, more ways to get to that end economic viability, I think is what a lot of conversations happen. And anybody can steal this microphone out of my hand. I know that those that are most active down with the legislature know that there is creative ideas coming consistently. And I think Chris can speak to energy, so I'm just going to put you on the spot, or you just have a question.
Well, I just had a question. Having worked with all of you on different stuff, I know one of the things you didn't talk about today is the neighbors, and how do you overcome in Traverse City where they're doing a master plan and talking about doing multifamily homes, increasing density in neighborhoods, and having the neighbors push back?
So I know we've had developers who have actually had projects approved locally and then lost because it's ended up going to the ballot because of the not in my backyard individuals. I know in Ottawa, in Kent. I know the Grand Rapids Chamber is doing they're trying to flip that term from NIMBY to YIMBY. And so they're trying to be proactive as they're hearing that developments are coming in to kind of get ahead of the development within a community to make it a YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. I think a lot of it is, it's that education, right? You hear a lot, I just heard, but we really like that empty field across the street from us and we don't want to see, I think that's why we've changed a lot of the terms too from affordable housing to attainable housing, because affordable puts a certain kind of vision in your head. And I've always said if you want, those lovely acres across from you as a neighborhood, buy it and keep it the way you want it. But that is a huge issue of, that community voice. And so whenever I'm speaking to chambers, my challenge to chamber members is if there is a development coming into your community, please go support those developers as a business organization and talk about how if those homes aren't in your community, how it's going to impact you as a business owner in the community if you can't hire workers to come because there's no place to live.
If I could just quickly respond to that. I think we know that when there's public comment, there may be a lot of unfounded claims that are made. And I think that rather than trying to argue those points, it's more effective, and we've seen it be more effective here in this community and in other parts of the state when the local governments and other leadership is educated on exactly what it is that they're doing and what they're expected to do. And so when I'm asked that question in other parts of the state, I often talk about what Little Traverse Bay Partnership did in terms of going out to townships, repeatedly talking about what their role was in housing and what they could expect. And I think that that's just a best practice that can never end because there's so much turnover in local leadership. You just have to keep continuing to communicate to local government what the need is, what their role is, what's true, what's not, so that when they hear those things from public comment, they know what's true and what's not.
I love that point, Sarah, as far as increasing that sort of fluency of the players themselves trying to understand what they're trying to do and why. But I also think it's important, especially in our rural communities, that sense of place, like Sarah will always, her organization is just founded on this completely. The sense of place is one of the most fundamental things that we have in our rural communities. There's a reason why we're here. And we have a lot to be proud of, and we have a lot to be defensive of as well. But the idea that we can just leave things the way they are, say single-family residential, and still talk about the numbers that we need, like 3,500 units. In Emmett County alone, if we do the 3-bedroom house on half an acre times 3,500 units, Emmett County doesn't feel like Emmett County anymore. Emmett County feels a heck of a lot more like Scottsdale, Arizona. And if we layer onto our Emmett County map our conservancy land, which we're very, very proud of, and we prioritize incredibly energetically, and we also layer on the wetlands, and we also layer on some of our elevation challenges that we have here, and then we take a look at where we have access to water and sewer, and what makes it more affordable, and also what makes it more accessible to the residents to be where the stuff is. Put the people where their work is and where their childcare is and where their schools are. We can't just put everybody over there or someplace else. It's not possible to do, and if we tried to do it that way, you would hate it just as much. So if we're very thoughtful and very intentional about the way we do this, and we're very inclusive about having those processes that involve public input all along, that by the time something comes up as far as the development is concerned, it's not a yes or no for that development, because we've already made it allowable, because we've already planned for this. So hopefully that eliminates some of it. It's not a perfect system, but that's what we're trying to do every day.
Job security. It's job security. Okay, please give a round of applause for our panelists. I would have liked to have time for more questions, but this was a lot of information. So, and I also want to be cognizant of your time. So I do encourage you, if you have not signed up for the newsletters, whether that be for Housing North or the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership you do, I encourage you to grab one of these fine folks if you would like to talk to them more, set up appointment to do more. I would love to say thank you again to DTE Energy, our town hall housing sponsor, as well as Comfort Keepers from Hot Topics, and very importantly, we really love the snacks from Roast and Toast and Alpine Media. We will release the video soon, as well as the Power Deck from today, along with extra QR codes and all the websites that you need. But more importantly, I want to thank not just everybody on this panel, but I want to thank you for coming. And I hope you saw something that was very intensive of this, and that was, this is collaborative. Housing takes a collaboration. It takes so many multiple entities. Clearly, it takes decades of preparation, and it takes a lot of time to get anything done. These wonderful, fine folks sitting up here eat, sleep, and breathe housing, and we are grateful for their efforts. There's wonderful faces in your community who do the exact same thing. So my task to you is this. Go out into your community, and the next time someone says nothing is being done about housing, I don't see anything new. I know one of those 1 in 4 people who don't have a place to live or who can't work in their own community that they live in. Remind them that the work is being done, that there are passionate people who care so much about this issue that sometimes they lose sleep at night. And I'm looking at a few people in this audience, developers and otherwise, that I know have. And remind them that we're going to continue to do the work. So spread the good news. To the point of Chris's question, to the point of what we were just talking about, be the YIMBY. Be the person that says, yes, in my backyard, yes, in Emmett County, we will combat this issue together. Don't be the person that turns a blind eye and says, well, not today. So that's what I ask you. Give them another round of applause, and thank you very much.